So if people join late, they'll be able to listen to the recording. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Fishman, and my company is called Hope Organizers, Inc. And as a professional organizer, I help people organize their spaces, their photos, their papers, which in turn organizes their lives. Everything in life involves organizing. Whether you're planning a vacation and you need to organize all the sites that you're going to see on your vacation, or if you have a medical condition and you have to keep all of your papers and all your lab results and all of your tests organized so as you go to see different doctors and different specialists, everything in life involves organizing. So we're very honored tonight to have a photo organizing expert. And before I introduce her, I want to just let you know that MJ Finstrom, who is handling the technology tonight, her company is called Hut Dogs, and she's a digital marketing company and promotion company. And her company actually won an award today. For those of you in the Los Angeles area, Senator Anthony Portantino awarded her an award, 25th Senate District Women Heroes of the Pandemic. And during the COVID, her company was having twice a week webinars where she was introducing and interviewing specialists during the past year and a half. And it was such a success that they her company Hut Dogs won an award. And I was interviewed on one of those interviews. That was nice. Every month, and I started in the early part of the year in 2021. I started an interview series because everything in life is affected by organizing. And this month, May, we have Carolyn Guntur. And as I said, she is a leading photo organizer. Her company is called the Swedish Organizer. And she is a certified photo organizer and a personal historian specializing in digital photo organizing and family history. Her company provides customized family history solutions to clients all over the world. As a digital organizing strategist, Caroline helps individuals and businesses get their digital systems in order so that they can share their stories and preserve their legacies. She inspires people to preserve their families' stories as they are all part of history and their legacies should live on. She also hosts webinars, workshops, and creates online courses. She is a Golden Circle member of NAPO, the National Association of Organizing and Productivity Professionals. She's a certified member of the Photo Organizers and a professional member of APG, Association of Professional Genealogists. And I know Carolyn from NAPO and the Photo Organizers. She runs the blogs organizingphotos.net and searchingscandinavia.com. Her photo organizing website, it was on the invitation, and it's https://www.organizingphotos.net. And her most popular digital photo organizing course is DPO-PRO, the Ultimate Photo Organizing. And there is a link on my website to her classes. So I'm very happy to have you here tonight. Carolyn is located in Illinois, so we're glad she's staying up late to be with us tonight. And I want to first ask you, Carolyn, can you address the overwhelmed feeling that people experience when they look at their lifetime of photos that are in multiple shoeboxes, bins, cardboard boxes in the garage, deteriorating photo albums, old cell phones and computers, and other devices that they want to organize, but they don't know where to start?
Thanks, Janet, for having me here. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to chat with all of you. And yes, definitely, I totally understand how that is overwhelming to look at, but I think it's really important to realize that you don't have to tackle everything at once. And even a little bit of work in the right direction, can do a lot of good. Um, One thing, especially that I always advocate, is for people to store their items safely, for example. So if you have photos in a bunch of, dirty plastic bins or bags or things like that, an easy thing that you can do without even getting to the organizing part, without ever, doing anything more, you can still store things right and prevent it from further decay. And that's like one step that you can take right away that doesn't take all that long, and it gets you in the right direction. And then, of course, we always want to get to the organizing, but storing things right will prevent further decay. And I think that's a big part of it to start.
Thank you. So let's dig deeper with the physical photos and save the discussion about digital for a little bit later in this webinar. One of the things that I do when I help clients with photo organizing is I remove photos from those magnetic sticky albums that were so popular when we were kids. Does everyone remember those? Carolyn, can you explain to us why those albums are so dangerous?
Yeah, so they were really great when you didn't know any better, right? um, they seem really convenient because they hold the photos in place and all of that, but that plastic and that glue really just isn't good for your photos, and it will decay it further. So one of the things that I always tell people, and I know Janet, you do that too, is that we always try to get photos out of those albums as quickly as possible, because they do decay the photos really quickly. And I've seen many cases where the photos get absolutely stuck and you just can't remove them without damaging them. And it's just not an ideal situation. So part of storing the photos correctly is to have them in a place where they can breathe a little bit and where they're not going to be damaged any further. And those magnetic albums just don't cut it anymore.
If a photo is damaged coming out of a sticky album or has been damaged sitting in a box in a hot garage for too long, is there a way to restore and preserve the image?
There is, but it takes a little bit of finessing, right? And I think it depends on how badly damaged it is. If it's just a little bit torn, we can always scan it in and we can restore it digitally with, let's say, Adobe Photoshop or some sort of program like that. If it's more damaged, you may not be able to remove it. You would have to scan it where it is, basically inside of the album. And then you could still restore it digitally. Restoring things physically is a lot harder, and that requires specialists to look at. But you can always do digital enhancements once they're scanned.
So would you say if they cannot get it out of a sticky album that they could leave it in the sticky album and then you could just scan that whole page?
Yes, we would scan it where it is to make sure that before we try and remove it and damage it at all, just to make sure that we have a digital copy before we even try to remove it. I've actually had plenty of cases where I've had to scan through glass and through plastic because the photo was so stuck that if I had removed it, it would have broken the whole thing apart. So just to have that digital image before you even attempt is a good place to start.
And just to let people know, Carolyn teaches classes all around the world, and she's very well known, and people will send her pictures from all over the world, either digitally or they'll express them in a secure, guaranteed, shipping method. So wherever you're located, Carolyn can help you. So Carolyn, once a person has gathered up all their photos and other media into a central workspace area, should they sort by format first, or how should they get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always love it when people start sorting by format. And the reason for that is because you likely have many different types of media, right? A lot of you will not only have photos, but you'll also have negatives. You will have slides. You will have, film reels and VHS tapes. And all of those require different equipment, right, to get them either scanned or converted. So it is always a really good idea to start sorting by format to really be able to see what you have, and then to figure out like what you are going to tackle first. So I always advocate for that. I think that's a great place to start.
And then once they've sorted by format, then should they start looking at the year, the topic, a combination for getting?
Yeah, I think it really depends on if you are having things scanned and converted, or if you're not. Obviously, I always advocate for that. So it's important to realize too that you don't have to scan everything. If you have duplicates, you don't have to scan things twice. That can go right away. If there is stuff that you don't need to have digitized or converted, maybe you want to discard that, maybe you want to save it. That's totally up to you. But then after that, whatever you want to keep, there are many ways that you can organize those. And obviously chronological is always a favorite for us organizers. We love the details. Sometimes that's too hard. Sometimes you don't have all the details anymore. And in that case, you can sort by landscape, you can sort by vacations and Christmases, and you can pick categories that work for you so that you can find what you need in a clear way. It's about how you remember things.
So if there's no date on a photo, are there other aspects that you can look at, like the type of paper it was printed on, or the clothes in the photo?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a great way to figure out. Sometimes you won't be able to know the exact date, but you can probably tell the decade based on clothing, based on hairstyles, based on other things, right? Based on locations. Something I love to do, actually, that I should mention is I love organizing by era. And usually that is like a defined period when I lived in a certain place. So for example, I lived in Hawaii for 5 years. Lucky me, right? But that to me is the era, right? That everything that happened during that time that could be going into that category. So that's another way that you can sort if you're not quite sure about the exact date, but you kind of have an idea of when things happen still in terms of decade or time period.
And so once you've got it sorted by format, what are your recommendations for culling or editing the piles further down?
Yeah, I always first start by getting rid of obvious things that I don't need to keep, right? And I think as organizers, we always start by doing that. And I always love to keep photos of people, for example. But if I go on a vacation and I take 40 photos of the beach, I only need 1 or 2 of those, the best ones. I don't need to keep all of those. And I tend to get rid of things that don't tell a story. Sometimes there's like obvious mistakes, blurry photos, anything that you really don't need. And sometimes you can also give those away to family or members or friends, especially if you have duplicates maybe of an event where somebody else might actually enjoy those photos. So there's a way to get rid of them in like a nice way where it doesn't feel like you're throwing stuff away.
After you've sorted and edited, what are the different options for organizing?
Yeah, so it depends on the format, right, of how you're going to store things. For photos specifically, I love keeping things in archival boxes. There are also archival photo albums still that you can get to keep things in. And I think it depends a little bit on how you like to enjoy them. Of course, we make things digital nowadays so that we can put them on our phones or our TVs or DVDs or however you like to enjoy your photos again. But one thing I always say is that no matter what you do with that, like I tend to keep originals because the original is always going to be the best copy. So even if I convert a bunch of things, obviously this doesn't include like blurry photos and mistakes and things like that, but the actual stuff, the actual collection that I want to keep, I always keep the originals because, technology changes, right? And 10 years from now, who knows what type of technology we're going to have. And you might at some point want to reconvert things.
Yes.
One quick example that I give you, Janet, is when I first scanned my photos back in the day and got them organized, I scanned at the highest resolution that I knew of at the time. And now that's, a blimp on the horizon. Basically, that's just not good enough anymore. So I'm actually in the process now of rescanning my own collection.
I know that sometimes when I would do photo organizing, I'd see these pictures that were 100, 150 years old, made with the old fashioned cameras. And somebody would come in and they would say, well, I want them scanned and then I want to throw them away. And I was just like, oh no, you can't throw away this 100-year-old photo because there's so much more to this photo than the image of their great grandparents. It's, the paper it was printed on, the type of camera it was taken on. There's just so much more history. You can't throw this away. And I found it very hard to do photo organizing because there's that emotional attachment. Being someone who did photography for many years, there was that emotional attachment to these old historical photos, and someone's just going to throw them away. No, you can't do that. So that was really hard for me to organize photos. So I much prefer, as many of you know, organizing, paper, and let people like Carolyn, who really love photo organizing, do the photos, because it bothers me to see people throw their photos away.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to another step then. So once the photos are organized, and they've sorted them and they've got them organized, what sharing options do people have?
Yeah, so obviously organizing is a means to an end, right? And we want you to do something with your photos. We want to get them back in your life and we want you to enjoy them again, because that's the whole reason why you took them in the first place. I always love creating photo books. I love creating slideshows. I love creating online family archives that we can share with family and friends. There's so many cool things nowadays that you can do in terms of photo gifts. And I mean, if there was ever a time to do something with your photos, it's now. You have endless options. My favorite would be the online photo archives because you can easily share them with everybody. But there's any number of solutions now to look at your photos again.
A lot of people are putting their photos in online albums or in clouds. And we've seen over the years, several of the companies that provided cloud platforms have gone out of business. Luckily, they were legitimate companies and they gave plenty of notice to the clients, the customers. But this is what scares me, and this is another reason for retaining the original source, is if one of these companies goes out of business, then, what do people do?
Yeah, right. And you and I have seen that a million times. So we know that is actually a very real concern. Not everybody shares that opinion, but I think many people have that in the back of their mind. And for me, at this point, at least, the online archives tend to be more of an output, meaning it's a project that I create with my photos, and it's a place where I share. It's not necessarily where I store the originals. Can you? Of course, but there are some things that you want to think about before you just throw all of your eggs in one basket. Obviously, you want to make sure you have a backup somewhere. We always advocate the 3-2-1 backup system, so that in case something happens, you actually have the originals. And there's other concerns like Janet knows, metadata disappearing and things like that. So you definitely want to be a little careful, and you just want to make sure you do your thorough research to make sure that you choose a reputable company and what rights you have, that those.
Can you explain that 3-2-1 again?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 3-2-1 rule is basically the official sort of backup recommendation that's out there. And what that means is that you have 3 copies of your important files. 2 of those backups should be on different media or different platforms or different devices, and at least 1 should be off-site. So in case something were to happen locally to your storage, let's say your computer crashes or something happens to your home, then you can actually access it someplace else. So a good example is my situation. For example, I'm originally from Sweden, so one of my copies is in my home in Sweden. One of my copies is here, 1 is online.
One of my favorite is making the photo books, because it's so nice. It could be put on a coffee table.
Yeah.
Be given as a holiday gift, and it's just so fun to pick up those books and look at the pictures.
That's never the wrong gift. It is appropriate in almost any situation, right? Like a good photo book. You can do it for any occasion, almost for any gift, and it's always appreciated. So yeah, absolutely.
Now, one of the things that we've seen happen is people are taking photos on their cell phones, and then they put it on, or their iPhones, their iPads, and they have it on a laptop, and their phone breaks or their laptop is stolen, and
Yep.
all their pictures are gone.
Yep.
What do you do with, what do you say to people who are using the digital items for their
right
photos?
So that's exactly where that 3-2-1 rule comes in. And what you want to make sure is that you have a system for, in case what happens, what is my backup plan, right? And that's part of what I do for people, is I help them with that system to figure out, like, what does that look like? And part of it is streamlining how you take photos and how you work with photos and what devices you include in your workflow. And part of that setup is to think about, like, if my computer crashed, what would happen? If I lost my phone, what would happen? Do I still have that accessible to me somewhere else? What is my backup plan for this? So that's kind of where that comes in. The thing is, right now, where people struggle, I think, is that there is so many devices, and it's very hard to consolidate into one place, right? And that could be for many reasons, but I think that's one place where people struggle, is that there's just so many devices that are connected right now, and it's very hard for people to sort of wrap their heads around where things live, where they're stored. Is it stored in the cloud? Is it stored on the device? All of that can be really hard to understand if you don't work in it like I do, 80 hours a week. So, part of the learning curve is to really sit down and look at where are the actual photos and how do we store them and how do we back them up? Because if you don't have everything consolidated in one place, it's very hard to back things up. And that's part of the issue.
Well, I know when we were young, we had one source. We had a camera.
Yes.
And we either put negatives or slide film in the camera.
Yeah.
Nowadays there still are cameras, but there's cell phones and iPads and computers and Dropbox, and there's Facebook and Instagram and all these different sources, like you just mentioned, WhatsApp and all the other things on the phone. Like, where and how can you bring that all together? Is there something you can do to bring it all together?
Yeah, that is exactly why I have a full-time job. That is a part of what I teach is called DPO flow, which means that, you sit together with me, or you take my course, or whatever it is. But one thing that we actually accomplish is that we draw out what that flow actually looks like. DPO, for those of you who don't know, is Digital Photo Organizing. So that's why I call it that. I think it's quite clever, actually. But how does your photos flow into your world where do they live, how do you back them up, and what do you create with them? Those are those 4 essential questions that we want to answer. And when people actually sit down and draw this out with me, the light bulbs tend to go off, because they realize, like, oh, I don't have that one place where I'm saving the photos, or oh, wait a minute, like I don't have a backup system, so let's fix that. So when people start to actually visually see that and draw that out with me and look at how their system actually looks on paper, it becomes tangible, and that's when we can fix it.
And then what happens when you're bringing in sources, pictures from, the different sites? Is there something that works to pull out the duplications? Because they might be the same photo may be in different places. Is there a way to eliminate duplications?
Right. So part of the step, right, is to consolidate. Like, that's the first thing, because without consolidation, you can't compare. So for you to be able to compare, we need to have things in one place. And whether that's your computer or an external hard drive or the cloud or wherever that happens to be, we need to know what that place is. And then based on that, we can deduplicate. In the cloud, obviously, it is harder to deduplicate because the cloud just isn't very good at that yet. But if you, for example, have them stored in something like Dropbox and you sync that to your computer, now you have a way to deduplicate. So depending on what systems you're using, there are ways we can do that. But it completely depends on like what you're using and how.
And then once you have deduplicated, how does one organize from there?
Right. So then you're stuck with the core collection, right? The stuff that you actually want to keep, which is great, that we make sure that all is all backed up. And then usually what I help people with too is to figure out what is the right photo management program for you. Is it Lightroom? Is it Photo Mechanic? Is it Apple Photos? Is it Mylio? Whatever it happens to be. I usually work with a person to decide what that looks like. I want it to make I want it to be something that they can manage on their own. I want it to be easy and fun, and not become like a chore. But there are different levels of skill for all of these different programs. And sometimes you don't even need a program. Sometimes it is quite enough to just store your photos in some folders if that's your tech level, right? So depending on the person, I tend to make that decision.
And then can you set filters?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, many of those programs will have ways to look at your photos in different ways. And that's why they're so powerful, because when they're stored in a folder, you really can't look at your photos in many different ways. But when you actually pull them into a photo program, now you can make albums, now you can use keywords, now you can use smart collections and maps and have a lot more fun with them. But it depends, again, like how you want to enjoy your photos, I think. It doesn't make sense for everybody to do everything like that.
And is there facial recognition?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love using that, because that's how we solve a lot of mysteries of like the old historical photos of who's related to who. They actually sometimes pick up on that.
How do you set that up?
Yeah, it's a little bit more advanced. But some clouds now do it automatically for you, and some you have to initiate if it's a program on your computer, for example. But they can all be done, and they're all actually quite fun to use once you get to learn how it works.
So there are many steps that are involved that we haven't talked about, but can you tell the listeners the very important step of backing up versus syncing?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing that's very difficult sometimes to differentiate between if you're sort of new to this. But backing up is essentially copying something to one location, right, to another location, so that you have an extra copy. In case something happens, you can go to that copy. Syncing is a process where you are synchronizing your devices to look the same. So if you delete something on, your phone, it also deletes from your computer, because the job is to keep that collection looking exactly the same in all places. And what happens and where people get in trouble is that they mistake syncing for backing up. So they think that, oh, you know, I can delete from my phone and they'll still be on my computer, or I can delete from the cloud and they'll still be on my phone. And if that connection is there and your photos are syncing, it actually deletes from every place. So it's very important that you actually understand the difference, that you don't start deleting and it goes away from everywhere, right? You want to make sure that you have a backup as well, so that if you make a mistake, you can go back to that backup. I hope that makes sense.
This is a good time to ask if anyone has questions. Does anyone have any questions? You can put them in the chat or you can unmute. No questions? Let me see if we have anything here. Someone just said that they had a photo book made for their 50th birthday and it was a priceless gift. And I've had same thing happen to me, and it's just wonderful to go back and look at.
Yeah.
Any questions?
While you're waiting for questions, Janet, I actually wanted to mention one fun thing, if it's okay, that I do every year, is I actually make a photo book of all the bloopers every year. And it tends to be a lot more fun actually than the good photos. Basically every awful profile shot, every mistake that I make, like all of the sort of fun photos of us like being a little silly and, you know, my daughter acting up and all that, I actually take those and I make an album out of it, and it is the hit every single year. So that's a good tip for you if you want to do something fun.
That is. If the task of organizing photos from your phones and other formats is too overwhelming for you, there are many good photo organizers out there, and you can locate them through the Photo Organizer's website. And this organization used to be called APO, the Association of Personal Photo Organizers. Carolyn is one of the members, and she's also one of the instructors there, as I mentioned before. And what makes Carolyn unique is that she has an online school where she teaches photo organizing. And as I said before, she's not region specific. She works with people all around the world. Can you say, Carolyn, a few words about your program from the self-study component up to the VIP package?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons, obviously, why I love working virtually is because I get to meet people from all over. And we have students now from over a dozen countries, which is really fun to see. And it also kind of shines a light on the fact that everybody has the same issues, no matter where they are. It's all the photos are the issue. And everybody wants to save those. So that's fun. So I have a course called DPO Pro, which basically takes you on the full journey of learning about photo organizing from start to finish, and actually completing your workflow and your setup and getting to organize your photos. We have a self-study where basically you will purchase the course and you will do it on your own time, and that's it. No involvement from me. You do it on your own computer, and you basically work through the material on your own without any further instruction. Then we have a supported VIP version of the course, which you get everything in the self-study, so the full curriculum as well. But we also have a community, and I have monthly group coaching calls. Actually, we have one tomorrow. So then you get that support when you get stuck, that people sometimes need to get over like the little bumps in the road. And then I have a private option as well, where they get the full curriculum and the monthly calls, but they also get a certain number of hours with me or my assistant coach to get even more personal and to work with, specific needs that people have. So yeah, it's a really popular course, and love having people from all over the world in there. we have a whole module on just digital basics. So understanding your operating system, understanding Mac versus PC, all those basics that you need to know before you actually start organizing your photos. There are certain things like that you need to be familiar with, like concepts like metadata and file names and folders and things like that. So we go the full the full spectrum from start to finish.
Years ago, a lot of these programs, you could buy the software, install it on your computer, and you were set, like Photoshop.
Right.
Nowadays, it's monthly subscriptions. Are you finding that all of these kind of programs have gone over to that monthly subscription, or can you comment on that?
Right. Yes, there are a few that still have sort of that one-time payment option, but I think overall in general, everything is moving towards that. I think the companies have figured out that they can make that money, bring revenue from people. And I think what happens too is if you don't pay attention, you start racking up the cost because you may be subscribing to multiple options that you don't actually need because you're not sure where your photos are stored. And I see that all the time. I just spoke with a client earlier today, and she does have iCloud, she has Google Drive, and she has Dropbox. And she's not quite sure why she has all three, but she's not sure where her photos are. And so she's kind of scared to discontinue either of those services. And so part of my work with her is going to be figuring out which is going to be the place that she saves her photos and what she uses and what she needs and what she doesn't need. So I see that all the time. And honestly, it's not all that easy to figure out unless you know what you're doing. So I feel that pain for sure. Yeah.
So we do have a question. What is the best user-friendly platform to make a vacation or other memories album? And so there's both the consumer type of album, which would be like a Shutterfly or a Snapfish, which is very easy to use. And then there's a little bit more professional albums. Can you talk about both the consumer and the more professional?
Yeah, right. So the consumer sort of grade platforms are usually much more user friendly, but because of that, they also have more limited options, and many of them are not designed to store your photos permanently. They're meant for you to upload photos and create things with them, but those platforms sort of assume that you save your photos elsewhere, Then if you have more professional options, or permanent options, I should say, they cost more and they may have a higher learning curve, but you get a lot more options for your photos, and they also tend to be better for storing your photos. One example I'm thinking of is Forever. They do great photo books now. And then of course we have even higher than that, we have the professional photographer type services, right? Like Miller's, and those people who make professional books, but those are usually only for the people who have companies like me and Janet.
But like Shutterfly is a very easy consumer program. One of the things, and I've always had good success using that. One of the things that you do have to look for when you're deciding on these companies is the cover, right? Things
Mm-hmm.
like how strong is the cover, and what
Mm-hmm.
does a page lie flat or not flat, or what are some other considerations that people should think about when they're trying to make a photo book?
Yeah, for me, I think about, to begin with, is this for myself or is this a gift? And what's the occasion? If it's a wedding gift, I want to make sure that it's a little more high end and that it kind of fits the occasion, but if I am making a fun book for a bunch of kids, I had one client who made a beautiful book for her grandson. We didn't need an expensive layout for that, like that was meant to be played with, right? Whereas a higher end gift, it might be a different type of book that you want to give. So that's the first thing, is like, what's the occasion here? And then I tend to always look for really good quality, and the size. the size is a big thing for me because I like it to fit very neatly on my bookcase and I don't like it sticking out. So, do you want it to be a table book, or do you want to be storing it like with regular collections somewhere? So that's a thing for me. And then, of course, the paper and the material, but that kind of also goes with the occasion, I think.
And one of the considerations I like to think about is, can you write text? Because I've seen some of these photo books that you can only put maybe a few word caption. Well, what if you want to write a whole paragraph? Some of these companies don't allow that. So this is a consideration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? One of the things that I see a lot, because I work with a lot of paper, and I'm a generalist organizer where I still, help people organize their closets and their rooms and their spaces, is just lots of stuff in garages, old photo albums that they've inherited from their parents, their deceased parents or grandparents. And I just like cringe because the heat is really bad for old albums and for photos. And you've got bugs in the garage that can eat through the glue that's in these photo albums. I've found people stored reels on top of their refrigerator, which is heat. All of this can destroy your photos and your film and your movies. So, or they're put into storage units, again, which could be outdoors and could have heat. And for me, the photos are such a preservation of the memories that you've got to take care with these things. And so many children are growing up now, and they're never going to see pictures of their childhood because their parents have them on phones and iPads, and the kid's gonna not have an album of their childhood. It's emotionally hard for me. So I'm glad that people like Carolyn, who love it, are doing it, because it's not my favorite thing to organize.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the danger nowadays, right? Is that we click so much, but we don't actually go back and look at it. And part of the reason, I think, is because it's very hard to sort of make it tangible, right? If you aren't sure where it's stored, like how do you know? And that's one part that I also feel very emotional about, is that, I want to make sure that we preserve this for the future. So it's not only, your legacy, right? It's your kids and your grandkids and generations after you that can have this. And that's really powerful. And I always work to make sure that happens. So,
like, why take photos if you're not going to share them? Why fill up your phone or even rolls of film if you're not going to share them? I mean, to me, that's what they're all about.
Yeah.
Any other questions or anything anyone would like to ask Caroline before we?
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, sorry, I'm not turning on my camera. My question has to do with, I have an iPhone, and I kind of think I know the answer to this already, but I'd love some advice or guidance. So I only in the last couple of years on my iPhone started making folders for my photos. And sometimes I'm pretty good at, snapping a picture of a flower and putting it in my plants folder. But there's so many photos I don't put in. I think, oh, I'll do it tonight, or I'll do it this weekend. And then, weeks go by and millions of photos are taken. Do you have any advice other than be diligent and set some time aside? Or when you take them, put them in the folder then? So that's the question, organizing with iPhone photo folders.
Yeah, and when you say iPhone folders, are you talking about Apple Photos, which is that flower, the multicolored flower?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, those are going to be what we call albums. And yes,
right.
Definitely, maintenance is always going to be there. This is one of those things that you kind of just have to get used to, like, doing the dishes. It's never going to stop. So that's maintenance is definitely a part of it. And if that program works for you, then that's great. Because it's fairly easy to use, and if you know how to access it and do all that, that's great. That being said, you don't need to have all of your photos in albums. You can browse them in Apple Photos by year. And I don't know if you have the desktop application, but if you do, that's something that you can connect and use with your iCloud, right? To be able to use maps and facial recognition. And that might be something fun that is a little easier than just working on your phone. But I think overall, probably the biggest thing that you can do is to delete if it's not a good photo, or if it's something that you don't need, like a screenshot or something like that. That will do more for your photo collection than anything else.
Oh yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, because what happens is that, I mean, I can't tell you how many screenshots of Trader Joe's groceries I have deleted from people's phones, with permission, of course. But, part of the issue now is that it's so much easier to take a photo of something than to write it down. And a lot of people get stuck with these reminders and to-dos and keeping that on their camera roll, when it's actually easier and better to have a different type of note-taking system that doesn't clutter up your camera roll. Because what happens is you create more work for yourself. And if you think about it, like most, I don't know, I'm not saying that you do this, but I see that happen a lot, is that people don't go back and actually look at those reminders anyway. So I find it better to have a different type of note-taking system, deleting anything that should not be left to your kids or grandkids or family members or friends. And then when you're stuck with that core collection, even if it's not perfectly organized, that's totally okay. Then you have that freedom of making albums when you feel like it, or, because you don't feel that heaviness of the clutter weighing you down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's totally true. What's funny is the albums on my mobile device. I will take pictures of like, oh, my husband likes that certain thing at Trader Joe's. And then that's the kind of thing I will put in an album. So good on me for those things. But there's so many other things I'm not doing adequately. Or
and if it is part of an intentional system, and that can work, but then let's make an album for Trader Joe's, and let's make it intentional, right? So that you know where to put it, and that'll make your life a lot easier. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for all that. And thanks for this whole thing, you and Janet. It's been great. I really appreciate it.
We have another question. It says, I can't seem to search on Apple iPhone photos. Is that correct?
You should be able to search. However, I will say that the desktop version of Apple Photos has a lot more functionality. So whenever somebody has Apple Photos, I always tend to recommend that they download Apple Photos to their computer. Actually, I shouldn't say download, but I should say use and sync it to iCloud, because it comes with your Apple device, right? So what you have to do is basically connect it to your iCloud and then download the photos to it. So then you will be syncing across devices, and you will be actually working with the same photos everywhere. And with the desktop functionality, you can do so much more with your photos, and it's a lot more fun. And it's always fun to see them on a bigger screen too, I think. So that would be my advice for that. I think that's always easier.
So as it was said, you don't want to be cluttering your phone with photos that you're not going to use. So before you take a bunch of photos, really think, what is the purpose of this photo? And if it's a short-term purpose, as to remind you to buy something at the grocery store, then make sure you delete it after you shop at the grocery store. Otherwise, as we've heard tonight, you're going to clutter your phone, which will it'll reduce you from being able to take future photos. And then you're going to have to deal with it in organizing the photos. So think about that when you go to take a photo.
Yeah, and one thing I can also mention that I always tell people is, like, if you sit down to watch an hour show, there's at least 15 minutes of commercials there where you can spend that time deleting stuff off of your phone that you don't need. And you won't believe what a difference it makes to have those little 5-minute bursts of energy sometimes. If you can even do 5 minutes a week, that will save you hours and hours of organizing down the road.
Or while you're standing in line at the bank or the post office, use that time to delete not only your photos, but text messages that you don't need, you know?
Yeah. It's part of that regular maintenance, you know, that makes it all work.
Well, if there's no more.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
The question I have is, I have an Android phone, and people like to send me, slideshows and pictures and like videos in my text, right? And I just don't know how to get it out of text, because they're in,
Right.
different texts, and I'm having a hard time with that. So how do you?
Yeah. Right. So there should be a way, and I would have to look at your phone to even give you accurate advice. So I apologize, but there should be ways, and there certainly is on most phones, to save it to your camera roll. So maybe that's something that you can look up, or I'm not sure who if you have anybody who helps you with that, but a quick Google search or YouTube video should probably take care of that. And most phones will have a way for you to save things to your camera roll so that it actually goes with the rest of your photos that you take. I have on my phone a simple share button, and I basically just share it and save it to my camera roll, and then it goes with. And that actually goes for a lot of apps too. So WhatsApp is a great example of that, where you actually have a setting to either include media that is sent with your camera roll or to turn it off, So you can decide if you are, let's say, in a WhatsApp group and you're getting a bunch of photos that you want to save, you can actually have that automatically get sent to your camera roll. Then if you're in other groups, you might want to turn it off, if you get a bunch of people who are sharing stuff that you don't necessarily need to have on your camera roll. So most phones will have a lot of functionality, and most apps will have that too, where you can actually specify the settings for that.
What do you mean by camera roll?
Camera roll would be basically what you press on to take photos and to look at the photos on the camera, or excuse me, on the phone. On the phone. So on mine, it's basically I will click on the camera, and I will be able to get to my camera roll from there, which is like basically the rolling list of all the photos that I've taken that's on the phone.
Can you, if someone sends you video through WhatsApp, can you move that from the phone to the computer?
You can. Well, from the phone to the computer, I mean, yes, you can. There are ways you can do that, either with cords or wirelessly, but you'll need to have some sort of method of connecting the phone and the computer. If it's an Apple product, you can AirDrop it too, for example, but it might depend on the devices that you have, how we get it off there most efficiently. But yeah, all of that can happen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I noticed that recently some of my friends would like even send photos to Facebook, and I said, wow, now I have a problem because it's under message, but then how do you get it out of Facebook?
Yeah.
So that's just a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you can, and most phones will have that. And obviously from your computer, you can always download things too, and add it to your collection. But yeah, that's part of drawing out that workflow of where do photos come from? Where do they get saved? How do we back them up from there? And what do we do with them afterwards? So if you actually can sit and think about that and how that all fits together, that's going to be very helpful for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Well, next month, we will be interviewing a closet organizer, or rather someone who builds closets. And so that will be our June interview. And you will get an email with that information. And in that email will be a link to this interview. So if you didn't quite understand something that Carolyn said tonight, you'll have an opportunity to listen again. And it'll also go onto my website where you can then listen to it as much as you want. So I want to thank MJ for managing the technology, and I want to thank Carol